Hi, and welcome to It Matters. With me today is the founder of Femme Foundation. She is recognized as one of the 7 women from Northeast that India is proud of having by She the People TV. She's also 30 under 30 by Forbes. And there are many more accolades and achievements that I don't have the time to name. Thanks, Angelica, for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, Zara. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So I want to start by how your journey personally started to the point that you decided to have Femme First Foundation. What was that journey before Femme First?
All right. So I am from Manipur. I moved to New Delhi at the age of 12. The environment back home was not conducive for education because of AFSPA. We used to have 80, 90 working days in 365 days because of the curfews and the general strikes and the bans. So it just wasn't conducive for academically, because you're not going to schools most of the time and all of that. So my parents decided to move me away to Delhi at the age of 12. So I came to Delhi, and while it was sort of a dichotomy, on the one hand, it was a culture shock because here in Delhi, I was able to, see shops being open after the sun sets. People were venturing out of their homes after even dark, which was impossible back home in Manipur because of the Armed Forces Special Power Act. People used to be scared of going out, and I would imagine, all the opportunities that lie ahead of me, and I would be really excited on the one hand, like finally a free citizen sort of a feeling. Then on the other hand, I was being racially discriminated as a young child. Even within my classrooms, my friends will mock me, will make fun of my small eyes, they'll make fun of my English accent and whatnot, right? So on the one hand, I was free from Forces Special Power Act. On the other hand, racism was an everyday reality. Um, it sort of led to me getting involved in the activism movement, in activism towards the racial crimes that was happening against it. We used to go out and protest, and I got my hands that way involved in the movement. But it was at the age of 20 that I left activism to join politics because I felt it was the best way to change the status quo. This was the year 2012. I was a 20-year-old. And the reason I plunged into politics right then was because 2012 was the year when a massive exodus of Northeastern people were happening from Bangalore, Pune, Mumbai, etc., where they were being sent back home, right? That was the year. So I was like, okay, enough of activism now. Maybe the best way is for me to get involved in politics. And that's how I got involved into politics. I was elected in Delhi University.
It's there's so much of who we become comes from where we come from, and I'm going to talk about racism as prevalent as it is in our country, and we don't recognize it. We only think of racism in terms of what happens in US, and it's a very disconnected phenomena. But I want to start by asking you about how would you describe what FemFirst does? What is it that if somebody wanted to enroll in, what is the objective of Fem First in terms of guiding them? Especially, I know you take in a lot of women who don't come from political background, but they are politically active or they are inclined and they're aware. So, what is it as an organization? Because at least in our country, unfortunately, we don't associate education with politics as much. We don't expect our politicians to have a degree or a law degree to come into politics. So, this is a completely new, I think, space that you're navigating.
So the fact of the matter remains that education, I believe, is not a defining criteria for any human being, right? But having the political skills and capability defines a political leader. And what we at FFF, Farm First Foundation, what we do is we provide capacity building, training, and mentorship of women aspiring to join politics or women who are already in politics. See, the main aim of our organization is not just about increasing of the number of women in politics. but also increasing the quality of their representation, right? And that's very core element to what we do. So we run this fellowship called the Women in Government Fellowship. And through this fellowship, what we do is we provide skills trainings for them. For example, topics like the Constitution and how do you look at the Constitution, right? If you have a political ideology which is left leaning or right leaning or centrist, then how do you look at the Constitution? How do you look at the history of the various political ideologies that exist in India, right? From basic things like that to going ahead and talking about how to participate in the legislative process, how to look at framing policies from a gendered lens, or for example, how to understand feminism and the history of it. Because as young women entering into the system, or someday when they are in a position when they make policies, they should be aware of what actually feminism is and what are the flaws of it, what are the positives of it, right? So we enable these young women and older women as well who have been part of the program to be very clear about their politics, who they are, what is it that drives them. And that's why we have this public narrative sessions as well. For 2 months, the fellows get trained by coaches from Harvard Kennedy schools, a public narrative team, which makes them understand what their politics is, who is the person behind the public persona, right? So it's an overall development. We look at it. And also we talk about policy making. We also, uh, because of the fact that I have been a part of the system and how I was a first generation and how I struggled, right? And having that someone to tell you at the end of the day, okay, we are with you, I'm standing with you, that also gives a lot of courage to young women, a strength and courage. That's why we also attach our fellows to mentors who are seasoned women politicians from various political parties. They are member of parliaments, they are political spokesperson, MLAs, MPs, former governor, etc. Depending on the fellow's ideology, we attach them to a woman mentor who helps them and talks to them like for 3 months, and then helps them shape their path, or if not shaping the path, just having that voice in their heads, okay, I'm here with you, you don't worry, that sort of a strength that give out. So that's what the fellowship does. But other than that, the organization does various other activities. One of the activities that we do is this Women in Government Conclave, which we run across every year. We do it in Delhi, but we are now making branching out to smaller towns and cities regionally, so that we are able to make the point of conversation about women's leadership into the mainstream discourse, so that more people are aware of the advantages of having more women elected. So that's one of the major goals.
You also touched briefly about the responsibilities or the perception of voters when it comes to women. Do you think that starting with a certain education for women who are entering, eventually it will seep down, or it'll go down to the voters, or that's a different battle, and that's a conversation that public representatives need to have in their own constituencies?
Actually, the fact of the matter remains that when it's a woman candidate, then there is this tendency of bias of the voters that they don't want to vote for a woman candidate. And this happens more often than not because politics is a 24-hour job. You have to be available on call if someone is arrested, for example, if there is some tragedy, then they should be able to call up their MLAs or their MPs, even if it's midnight or after 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, whenever the emergency arises. But when it's a woman, there is that mental block in the minds of the voters that, okay, the person won't be available. That's number one. Number two is generally the perception is women are weaker and they're unwinnable. And then number three comes electoral funding. Women candidates, according to research, have found it very difficult to get funding in comparison to male candidates, right? So these are some certain factors that exist. However, we have also seen that gender does not really play that important a role if it comes from a political family. For example, you belong to a dynasty. your grandmother or your grandmother or your father or your grandfather has been in politics for the longest period of time, and if you are a woman and entering into the field, then people don't tend to look at you as a woman candidate. They tend to look in terms of the family legacy. So therefore, it becomes easier. But for young women out there who are like me, first generation, it becomes extremely difficult for us to turn the tide, right? But again, mass appeal works. Again, working on the ground and having that connectivity with your voters really work. And that is why we're seeing, right? For example, in the current Lok Sabha, we have a lot of young women without any political backgrounds who have been elected to the Lok Sabha. That is why India has 78 women right now in the Lok Sabha, which is the highest it has ever been, which is 14% of our Lok Sabha. Unfortunately, though, it is 10% below the global average of 25%.
So here, I do want to ask you what do you think is it that drives this perception that women don't win or they don't have the, is it just the kind of narrative, the patriarchy we've grown up with, that they're weaker, they're
Absolutely, yeah.
emotional?
Absolutely. Patriarchy is the biggest, what do you call it, culprit, right? Yeah, because we all have this preconceived notions in our heads, right?
Yeah.
And even when women do well, it's kind of the credit is given to the advisors and the people who work around the woman. Even in the panchayats, for example, India currently has almost 48% women who are elected at the panchayat levels, and they have proved themselves. They have been elected. Even then, a lot of the people wouldn't see 80%, 90% of the hard work they do, but they will see only the fact that, oh, some of them are pradhan patis or something like that they call, right? So they tend to look at the negative and look only at that and then blow it out of proportion, but they tend to not look at the way women leaders are dealing with it. But I think there is a small shifting tide that's happening, and that's thanks to COVID. I say thanks to COVID because of the way women leaders across the world have led during COVID. So names like Jacinda Ardern, or Angela Merkel have become very normalized in terms of how they led during the pandemic. And that is resulting in conversations happening, at least in the, tier two, tier three cities, about how women can be good leaders as well. I think that is a starting point for this conversation.
Women are sexualized no matter where they work, right? I mean, politics is no exception. But and you and I've seen you talk about intersectionality. Going back to your experience with racism, first of all, is racism rampant in politics? Number one. And I have a follow up question with that. With the social media and the new kind of media that's coming in, we've got web series. They talk about a lot of issues that mainstream media would not talk about. So, and Me Too happened. So, a lot of things that were hidden. Do you think racism or sexual exploitation, these things are now better addressed, or was it just a phase where we were suddenly addressing it and now it's life as normal?
I think to an extent, people are talking about it, which is really helpful. Earlier, I mean, this was 20 years ago, 17, 18 years ago when I moved to Delhi, it was still I would walk down the streets and people will still call me names and whatnot, and I would try and pick and fight, but I become the bad person, right? But now there is a little more awareness than earlier. But it's still in existence. For example, renting a house as a single woman in Delhi is extremely difficult for me. I have to struggle so much to the extent that this time when I had to move houses, I had actually paid a deposit to the broker, and I spoke to the owner over the phone, and the person accepted the money and whatnot. And when I submitted my ID card for verification, the owner next day gave it back to me because the person came to know that I was from Manipur and I'm a single lady who's going to stay, right? To that extent, where people are still not comfortable with renting out spaces. As a woman from the Northeast, we are often labeled as characterless or easy. There is this perception that, okay, Northeastern women are supposedly easier. You can buy them clothes and you can just have your way with them. or,
We'll still live with them and
and
not have
then
consequences.
exactly, and then the fact that most of the people tend to work in the hospitality sector and the retail sector, there is this general perception that all Nordistan women are easy and characterless. So it becomes extremely difficult in that context, to even rent a house or even to work, even in spaces like, for example, I was in politics, right, for a long time. And even when I wasn't going down on the field, people would always look at me like I'm going to be easy, right? I'm going to be available, easily available. And this involves even my peers, even my peers or even seniors who would believe that, I just because I'm from the Northeast. There's sometimes they'll go on to say things, feminisms like Northeastern women are so progressive. And by progressive, the definition is they are willing to
Justifying
do
their
whatever they
behavior.
want, right? So there is that innuendos, just put it out there, and that extra lingering handshake or extra lingering hug when you feel extremely uncomfortable. It becomes very much normal. So, and I've lived it, I've experienced it, and coming to your question about racism, right? Me as a woman, of course, I face it much more. But it's even with men as well. I mean, you see, even in today's low parliament, even in today's cabinet, even in today's political parties, look at the number of people from the northeastern region who are holding important positions. I mean, they are there, some of them are there, but it's like tokenism. Same with women, right? They give some seats to the Northern people, and then they're just happy with it, and that's not really representation, because even though they have a seat at the table, they don't really have a say at the decision making level, at the leadership level.
It's not just legislators. I think the worst kind of and the most sensitization that we need is the police, because some of the most insensitive things that come out of their mouth, they have no idea that it's hurtful. They really
I
think.
agree with you, Zara, entirely, because this was 10, 15 years ago when a lot of crimes used to come up. We used to go to the police stations because of racism, again, big issue in Delhi, right? And the way they used to talk to us was very, very different from the way they talk to us right now, because it has been made mandatory to give them sensitivity training for, to deal with Northeastern people, to understand. There is a special unit of Delhi police that looks after the Northeastern people in Delhi, where in any case, any matter of racism that comes up, we go to them. The special Northeastern unit in Delhi police. So yes, sensitivity has really, really helped Delhi police, over the years. And I think even in terms of gender, I think the police, they should be made specifically how to deal with the LGBTQ community, how to speak to women, etc. Right? It's of course very much needed.
Yeah. We were talking about ignorance, but we also are living in a time where everything is misrepresented or miscommunicated. So now even feminism has various definitions, and it's used like a bad word sometimes. You're called a feminazi. How, if you had to really oversimplify it for people who aren't aware of these terms, how would you define patriarchy, feminism, and leadership in your life, because you're dealing with all three issues right
So, feminism has unfortunately a negative connotation now, because a lot of people do not understand and misrepresent it, like you said. But at the core of the belief of feminism is equity and equality. It's knowing the fact that, to begin with, patriarchy is about power dynamics. It's about one gender having more power than other gender. It's about one gender, oppressing other genders because they just have much more power. I mean, after all, we live in a world that is built by men for men, right? So that's patriarchy there. And then it comes to feminism, is about knowing that, okay, we are oppressed, we as women are oppressed. Now, the definition of feminism has broadened in itself, and it's according to the fourth wave feminism. It's not just about women who are oppressed anymore. It's also about the people who belong to other marginalized communities who are oppressed. It's understanding that men have more power and the other genders are oppressed. Therefore, we're going to ask for equity. And then once we achieve equity, we're going to ask for equality. So that's what feminism is about. And leadership is about, um, I always say this, and it's very core to my life itself. Is if you are going to be a leader, if you even perceive yourself as a leader, then first thing you need to do is to understand your politics. What is your politics, right? I mean, it's self-awareness, but once you know that, then it'll be easier for you to understand other people, and you know how you can be of support to them, or how you cannot be of support to them because of your politics. So leadership is about enabling others, taking responsibility, but more importantly, empathizing with them and understanding your politics and their politics.
My one of my favorite things to say to everybody is not every woman is a feminist, and not every feminist is a woman. And I keep hoping that more and more men actually stand and champion the cause, because allyship is the only way forward. And it's not
Absolutely.
just women and men. I think it's across the country, across the world for that matter. Solidarity goes a very long way.
Absolutely. We at Femme Foundation, we have this saying that, gender can never be a one-sided conversation. It cannot be a one-sided road. It's something that affects the whole of society, and we as a whole of society need to tackle it together.
What a wonderful note to conclude on. Thank you so much, Angelica, today. It's been honestly less of an interview and more like a learning experience. I think I just gave everybody a free class with you.
Thank
And
you so much, Zara.
and more than anything, I want to thank you for what you're doing, because, like you said, you're not doing this with women who come from a lot of political backing. You're doing this with women who are politically aware, are strong, but don't have, let's just say, a path that is easy. So you're trying to make it a little soon. So more power to you. And I hope this journey that you've started leads to you being in the parliament, and we'll see that day very, very soon. So thank you so much for giving me this time, Angelica, once again, and we wish you the best.
Thank you so much, Zara. And thank you so much, everyone in your team, for making this happen. And I wish you all the very best. Bye bye.